The courtroom in Igbosir High Court, Lagos Island smelled like old paper and floor polish. Not a nice smell. More like a place where people's lives get folded and stamped. Tund stood in the middle aisle, hands locked together so tight his knuckles looked pale. His suit was too warm for Lagos heat. Sweat slid down his back, slow, like it had time. On the other side, Amaka's family filled a whole bench. Her mother wore black lace. Her eyes were dry, but her face looked like it had been crying for weeks. Her older brother, Chika, didn't sit. He stood with his arms crossed, staring at Tund the way you stare at a snake you don't trust. The judge entered. Everybody stood. The room went quiet, like even the fans on the ceiling were afraid to make noise. The judge adjusted his glasses, looked down at the file, then looked up at Tund. And then it happened. He spoke, clear and final. As the legally married husband, the defendant is entitled to the deceased's property. A sound burst out from Amaka's side. Not words. Not a scream. A broken, ah, like her mother's chest cracked open. Chika stepped forward like he wanted to jump over the wooden barrier. "You can't do this," he shouted. "She was our daughter. Our sister." The judge raised his hand once. A small movement. Like swatting a fly. "Order." Tund didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He just blinked fast, like his eyes were burning. Because the truth was, he wasn't thinking about houses or land. He was hearing Amaka's voice in his head. "Tund, please, don't let them turn me into a fight." But it was already a fight. A loud one. A public one. And then Chika said the thing that made the whole room freeze. "You killed her. And now you're taking her life." Tund's stomach dropped. The judge looked down again, tired now, like he had heard too many sad stories in one lifetime. But Chika wasn't done. He pointed straight at Tund. "Tell them how she died. Tell them what you did in that house." Tund opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Because the story of how Amaka died was not a clean story. It was messy. It had blood, and fear, and late-night phone calls. And one decision Tund made. That still woke him up some nights, sweating, whispering, "I didn't mean to." The judge's gavel lifted. Bam! And the sound hit like a gunshot. Tund flinched. And in that moment, with all eyes on him, he realized something. Even if the court gave him everything, Lagos would still decide he was guilty. And as the bailiff guided him toward the exit, a woman's voice called out from behind. Soft. Sharp. Familiar. "Mr. Tund Adebayo." Tund turned. A lady stood near the back, wearing a plain white blouse and a hospital ID card. She was a doctor too. And her face looked like she knew something he didn't want anyone to know. She raised her phone slowly, like she was about to show him a picture. Then she said, "I was on duty the night your wife died." Tund's throat went dry. What are you saying?" Her eyes didn't blink. "I'm saying, the truth did not end in that courtroom." And then she added, very quietly, "I have the notes." Tund felt the hallway tilt under his feet. Because if she had the notes, then somebody else had the truth. And the truth was dangerous. Tund stared at her, heart pounding, and whispered the only question that mattered. "Do your notes say I killed her?" 2 years earlier, Ikeja, Lagos. Before the courtroom. Before the shouting. Before the word murder started following Tund like a shadow. There was a Tuesday afternoon in Ikeja City Mall, near the food court, where life still felt normal. Tund was sitting alone with a plastic cup of cold yogurt. He wasn't hungry. He was just sitting because he didn't want to go home yet. Home was a rented 2-bedroom in Ogba, and his mother called it temporary. But Tund was tired of temporary. He had returned from abroad just 3 months before. Deported. Dropped back into Lagos like a phone with a cracked screen. Still working, but not the same. People thought he came back with bags of money. Some money, yes. But not the kind of money that can protect your pride. That day, his friend Kunnel said, "Guy, come out. At least breathe fresh air." Fresh air in Lagos. Funny joke. But Tund came anyway. That was when Amaka walked in. She wore simple scrubs, not fancy clothes. Her hair was packed in a low bun, and she carried a small tote bag that said "Doctor on Duty" in red letters. She looked tired too. She ordered a bottle of water and stood to the side, checking her phone, lips pressed together like she was counting something. Kunnel waved. "Doc Amaka." Amaka looked up and smiled. "Kunnel. You are still disturbing people." Kunnel laughed. "Come meet my guy. This is Tund." Amaka looked at Tund. Not in a flirty way. More like, careful. "Hi," she said. "Hi," Tund replied. He noticed her eyes first. Calm eyes. The kind that have seen too much and still try to be kind. Kunnel left them for a minute, pretending to receive a phone call. That was his style, setting people up without saying he was setting people up. Amaka nodded at Tund's yogurt. "You actually like this thing?" Tund smiled a little. "No. I just didn't want to sit with nothing." Amaka laughed once. A small laugh. Then she said, "That is the most honest thing I've heard today." Tund didn't know why, but the way she said it made his chest loosen. They talked. Small things at first. Traffic. Work. Ikeja heat. Then deeper things. Amaka asked, "So, what do you do?" Tund hesitated. In Lagos, a man's worth is often tied to what he does, what he drives, what he can buy. And Tund didn't want pity. Or judgment. So he said the truth in the safest way. "I'm rebuilding." Amaka tilted her head. Rebuilding from what? Tund looked down at his hands. The skin near his thumb was rough from years of warehouse work. He said, "I was abroad. I got deported." He expected her face to change. People's faces always changed. But Amaka didn't flinch. She just said, "That must have hurt." Tund looked up fast. "You don't think I'm, a criminal?" she finished gently. He nodded. Amaka shrugged. "I'm a doctor. I've seen good people in bad places. And bad people in good places." Then she said, "Tell me what really happened." And Tund did. Not all the details. But enough. How he overstayed after a job promise to fix his papers. How the promise never happened. How immigration caught up with him. How shame followed him on the plane home. When he finished, he expected silence. Instead Amaka said, "At least you came back alive." Tund blinked. "That's your takeaway?" Amaka nodded. "Some people don't get a restart." She checked her phone again. Her smile faded. Tund noticed. "Everything okay?" he asked. Amaka exhaled slowly. "Work. Patience. Bills. Family pressure." "What kind of pressure?" Amaka looked around, like the walls might hear. Then she said, "People think because I'm a doctor, my life is perfect. But it's not." Tund wanted to ask more, but he didn't want to push. So he said, "Can I see you again?" Amaka looked at him for a long second. Then she said, "If you promise not to buy yogurt again." He laughed. "Deal." That was how it started. Not with fireworks. With tired people meeting in a loud mall and choosing to talk anyway. Their first real date was at Sweet Sensation, Adeniran Ogunsanya, Surulere. Not fancy. Not romantic in the movie way. But they sat by the window with meat pie and rice and small chops. Amaka ate slowly, like her mind was still in the hospital. Tund asked, "Do you ever stop thinking about work?" Amaka smiled without looking up. "No." He said, "That sounds exhausting." She finally looked at him. "It is." Then she surprised him by saying, "Sometimes I sit in my car after work and I don't go inside my house immediately." Tund frowned. "Why?" Amaka shrugged, embarrassed. "Because it's quiet inside." Too quiet. That hit him. Because his own house was also quiet. Quiet in a lonely way. Tund nodded slowly. "Yeah. I get that." Amaka stared at him. "You do?" Tund tapped the table once. "People think deportation is just a flight. But it's like, your life gets erased." Amaka's face softened. She reached for her water bottle, then paused. And very quietly, she said, "I'm tired of being strong." Tund didn't know what to say. So he did something small. He slid his hand across the table, palm up. Not grabbing her. Not forcing. Just offering. Amaka stared at his hand. Then she placed her fingers in it. And for a second, she looked like she might cry. But she didn't. She blinked it back and joked, "If you break my hand, I will sue you." Tund laughed. But his laugh had a crack in it. Because for the first time in a long time, he felt like someone actually saw him. A month later, Tund met Amaka's family in Enugu, at her father's house in Independence Layout. The living room was clean and cold, like a place built for respect. Her father, Mr. Nwosu, was polite but sharp. Her mother barely smiled. Then her uncle asked the question that cut through the air like a knife. "So you were deported?" Tund swallowed. "Yes, sir." "And you came back with, what exactly?" Amaka's face tightened. "Uncle." But her uncle raised his hand. "Let him answer." Tund forced his voice steady. "I came back with plans. And some savings." Her uncle leaned forward. "Savings that can maintain my niece's lifestyle?" Tund felt heat rush to his face. Amaka snapped, "I can maintain my own lifestyle." Her father cleared his throat. "Amaka." Amaka stood up, her chair scraping the floor. She looked at Tund and said, "Let's go outside." Outside, the evening air smelled like wet grass. Amaka paced near the gate, angry and embarrassed. Tund said, "It's okay. They're just protecting you." Amaka stopped pacing. "No," she said. "They are judging you. And I hate it." Tund shrugged, trying to act strong. But inside, something small broke. He said, "Maybe they're right." Amaka spun toward him. "Don't say that." Tund looked down. "I don't want to be a burden." Amaka stepped closer. "You're not a burden. You're a man who had a setback. That's all." Her voice shook a little. Then she said, softer, "Please don't leave because people talk." Tund stared at her. And he realized, she wasn't just defending him. She was afraid. Afraid of being alone again. He nodded. "I'm not going anywhere." Amaka exhaled like she had been holding her breath for weeks. But that night, as Tund lay on the guest bed, he couldn't sleep. Because he heard the uncle's words repeating. Savings that can maintain her lifestyle. And he thought, if I marry her, will they always see me as the man who came back with nothing? He didn't know it then. But that question would later become a weapon. Back in Lagos, months later, on a night when rain slapped the windows in Ogba, Amaka called Tund from the bathroom. Her voice sounded strange. Not sick. Not sleepy. Just scared. Tund, she whispered. Come. He rushed in. Amaka stood in front of the mirror, holding a small white tissue. There was blood on it. Not a lot. But enough to make Tund's heart jump. Amaka looked at him, eyes wide. I think something is wrong, she said. Tund stepped closer. Maybe it's just. No, she cut in, voice shaking. This is not normal. She pressed her palm against her lower belly. Then she whispered the sentence that changed everything. I don't think I can have a baby. Tund's mouth went dry. Because he saw the fear in her face. And he also saw something else. A new fear. The fear of what her family would say. The fear of what people would assume about him. He reached for her, but Amaka flinched like she expected bad news. And then, his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. A man's voice said, urgent and low. Is this Tund Adebayo? Your wife's hospital just called. They said she collapsed. Tund froze. What do you mean collapsed? The voice repeated, louder now. She collapsed. You need to come now. Tund looked at Amaka. Amaka looked at him. And in that tiny bathroom, with blood on tissue and rain outside and fear crawling up their throats, Tund realized this was no longer just a love story. This was the beginning of a storm. Tund grabbed his car keys, Amaka trembling behind him, and as they ran toward the door, he heard her whisper. Please, don't let me die. And Tund thought. What if I can't stop it? The rain did not slow down. It poured like someone turned a bucket upside down over Ogba Road. The gutters overflowed. Car lights blurred into long yellow lines. Tund's hands shook as he tried to start the car. It failed the first time. Start, he muttered. Amaka sat beside him, one hand pressed to her lower belly, breathing too fast. I'm okay, she whispered. But she didn't sound okay. She sounded like someone trying to convince herself. The engine finally roared. Tund sped out into the rain. Horns blasted. A Danfo bus swerved close. Water splashed across the windshield so thick he could barely see. He kept one hand on the steering wheel. The other kept reaching for Amaka's knee, like he needed to feel that she was still there. Stay with me, he said. I'm not going anywhere, she replied. But her voice cracked on the last word. And Tund didn't like that crack. Not at all. They reached St. Catherine's private hospital in Ikeja 15 minutes later. It felt like an hour. Nurses rushed out with a wheelchair. Amaka tried to stand strong. I can walk, she insisted. She couldn't. Her legs buckled halfway, and Tund caught her under the arms. Easy, he whispered. The smell inside the hospital hit them immediately, antiseptic, clean sheets, and something sharp underneath it. Fear has a smell too. You can't name it, but you feel it. Doctors moved fast. Questions flew. When did it start? Any previous surgery? Pain level? Amaka answered between breaths. Tund stood useless beside the bed. He hated that feeling. He had carried heavy boxes in freezing warehouses abroad. He had worked double shifts without complaining. He had survived deportation. But this he could not lift. A nurse gently pushed him back. Sir, please wait outside. The curtain closed. Just like that, he was separated from her. He stood in the hallway, staring at a wall with peeling paint near the corner. He noticed things that didn't matter. A crooked clock. A flickering bulb. He called her brother. No answer. He called her mother. She picked up on the second ring. Hello? Mummy. Amaka is in the hospital. What happened? She collapsed. They're checking her. Her mother's breathing changed on the phone. Slower. Controlled. We are coming. The call ended. Tund leaned against the wall and slid down slowly until he was sitting on the cold tile floor. He didn't cry. He just stared at his hands. Please don't let me lose her, he thought. But deep down, another thought tried to grow. What if this is bigger than us? A doctor stepped out. Female. Early 30s. Tired eyes. Her name tag read, Dr. Halima Yusuf. Tund jumped to his feet. How is she? Dr. Halima removed her gloves slowly. She has internal bleeding. The words hit hard. From what? Tund asked. She had previous surgery, correct? Yes. There may be complications from scar tissue. Tund's heart thudded loudly in his ears. Can you fix it? Dr. Halima hesitated. Just for a second. And that second felt like a lifetime. We will try. Try. Tund hated that word. Please, he said. Please. Dr. Halima nodded once and went back inside. Tund watched the curtain move. Then he heard something he never forgot. Amaka's voice. Weak. Where is my husband? Tund pushed past the nurse. I'm here, he said. They let him in for a moment. Amaka lay on the bed, oxygen mask over her mouth. Her skin looked lighter than usual. Not glowing. Just drained. She tried to smile. Tund, she whispered. I'm here, he said, holding her hand. Her fingers were cold. I'm sorry, she said. For what? He asked quickly. For being difficult, she murmured. Tund shook his head hard. You are not difficult. She swallowed. If something happens. Nothing will happen, he cut her off. Amaka stared at him. And for the first time since he met her, she looked afraid. Not of pain. Of leaving. She squeezed his hand. Don't fight my family, she whispered. Tund frowned. Why are you saying that? Promise me. He hesitated. I promise. Her eyes closed slowly. As nurses moved him back again. And the curtain shut. The rain outside slowed to a steady drip. Amaka's family arrived one by one. Her mother walked straight past Tund into the hallway. Where is she? She demanded. They're operating, Tund said. Chika arrived next, face hard. He didn't greet Tund. He just stood near the wall, staring. Hours passed. A nurse came out once for blood. Then again for something else. Every time the doors opened, everyone stood. Every time they closed, hope dropped a little more. At 2:17 a.m., Dr. Halima came out again. This time, she did not remove her gloves slowly. She had already taken them off. That was the first bad sign. Tund's legs moved before his brain did. How is she? Dr. Halima's lips pressed together. I'm sorry. The world tilted. Her mother screamed first. A loud, raw sound. Chika punched the wall. Tund didn't move. He just stared at Dr. Halima like maybe she would correct herself. Like maybe she would say, wait. Wrong file. But she didn't. She lost too much blood, the doctor said softly. We tried everything. Tund's ears rang. Everything became distant. He walked past everyone into the room. Amaka lay still. Too still. He touched her hand. Cold. He leaned close to her face. "Wake up," he whispered. Nothing. He pressed his forehead to hers. "I promised," he whispered again. But promises do not control death. The next morning, the hospital corridor was crowded. Relatives. Friends. People whispering. Amaka's body had not even been taken to the morgue yet when Chica walked up to Tund. "You did this," he said quietly. Tund blinked. "What?" Chica stepped closer. "She was fine before she married you." "That's not true. She had surgery after marriage." "She had fibroids before marriage," Tund replied, voice shaking. Chica leaned in. "And who chose the hospital?" Tund froze. "I did," he admitted. Chica's eyes darkened. "So you chose the place. You signed papers. You handled everything. Because I'm her husband." Chica's jaw tightened. "Or because you wanted control?" Tund felt something snap inside him. "I loved your sister." Chica shook his head slowly. "She had property. Land. A house." Tund stared at him in disbelief. "You think I married her for land?" Chica's answer came cold. "I think you came back from abroad with nothing." That sentence sliced deeper than any knife. People nearby stopped whispering. They were listening now. Tund stepped back like he had been pushed. He looked around. He saw it. The doubt. In their eyes. 3 days later, Tund returned to their duplex in Lekki Phase 1. The house smelled like her perfume. Her shoes were still near the door. Her medical books stacked neatly on the dining table. He walked into their bedroom slowly. Her pillow still had a small dent. He sat on the bed. Silence wrapped around him. He pulled out his phone. There was a message from an unknown number. He opened it. A photo appeared. It was a copy of a hospital chart. At the top, emergency admission notes, Amaka Nwosu Adebayo. His heart began to race. Under complications, a handwritten line stood out. Delay in bringing patient to hospital. Tund's stomach dropped. Delay? He had driven as fast as he could. The message came again. Another text. Interesting note, isn't it? His hands trembled. He typed back. Who is this? The reply came immediately. Someone who was on duty. Another message. Did you tell them how long she was bleeding before you drove? Tund felt cold. He tried to remember the timeline. The blood. The bathroom. The call. The drive. Was there a delay? 5 minutes? 10? Did that matter? His phone buzzed again. If this goes to court, that note will matter. Tund swallowed hard. Court? His chest tightened. Because now, this was no longer just grief. This was becoming something else. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the Lekki skyline, Tund heard a loud knock on the gate. Not gentle. Not polite. Hard. He walked to the balcony and looked down. 3 men stood outside. 1 in police uniform. 2 in plain clothes. The officer looked up and shouted. Mr. Tund Adebayo. Tund's heart pounded. Yes? The officer held up a paper. We have questions about your wife's death. Silence filled the air. Then the officer added. And you need to come with us. Tund's fingers gripped the railing. Below him, neighbors were already peeking through curtains. Watching. Judging. And as he turned to go downstairs, his phone buzzed again. One last message from the unknown number. Now let's see how strong your promise is. Tund whispered to himself. I didn't kill her. But for the first time. He wasn't sure if anyone would believe him. The gate creaked open. And Tund stepped out to face the police. The metal gate screeched as it opened. Tund stepped outside slowly. Neighbors stood across the street pretending to water plants that didn't need water. Curtains shifted. Phones lifted. The police officer in front adjusted his cap. Mr. Tund Adebayo? Yes. You will come with us. Am I under arrest? Tund asked. The officer didn't answer directly. We just need to ask some questions. That sentence sounds soft. It is not soft. Tund locked the gate behind him. His hands shook, but he tried to hide it. As he walked toward the police vehicle, he saw Chica standing near the corner of the street. Watching. Not surprised. Not shocked. Just watching. That hurt more than the police. Inside the police van, it smelled like old leather and sweat. Nobody spoke for 5 minutes. Lagos traffic moved slowly under yellow streetlights. A woman selling roasted corn knocked on the window at one junction. Life was still going on. That felt strange. Tund stared at his reflection in the glass. He looked tired. Older. The officer beside him finally said, "Sorry for your loss." Tund nodded. Then why am I here? He asked quietly. The officer didn't look at him. Family made a complaint. Of course they did. They took him to a station in Area F, Ikeja. The room was small. One metal table. 2 plastic chairs. A fan that turned slowly and made a clicking sound every time it rotated. An inspector walked in. Tall. Bald. Calm eyes. Inspector Bamadil, he said, sitting down. He opened a file. Your wife died 3 days ago. Yes. Cause of death, internal bleeding. Yes. Hospital note says there was a delay in bringing her in. Tund felt the air leave his chest. There was no delay, he said quickly. Inspector Bamadil raised an eyebrow. What time did she first complain? Tund tried to remember exactly. It was around, maybe 8:30 p.m. And what time did she arrive at the hospital? Close to 9. The inspector flipped through the papers. Admission says 9:18 p.m. That's traffic. Tund snapped. It was raining heavily. The inspector studied his face. You argued with her that night? No. You're sure? Yes. The inspector leaned back in his chair. You see, Mr. Tund, when someone dies, especially a woman with property, people ask questions. Tund swallowed. I didn't marry her for property. That's not what I asked. The inspector leaned forward. Did you know she updated her land documents 2 weeks before she died? Tund blinked. No. She removed her brother as secondary signatory. The room felt smaller. What? The inspector watched him closely. And she listed you. Tund's heart pounded hard. I didn't know that, he repeated. Inspector Bamadil tapped the file slowly. Her brother thinks you pressured her. Tund laughed once. A broken laugh. She was stronger than me, he said quietly. Nobody pressured her. The inspector didn't smile. People do strange things for money. Tund's voice dropped. I've lost enough. I don't need blood money. The inspector held his gaze for a long second. Then he said something unexpected. I don't think you look like a killer. Tund blinked. But, the inspector continued, I've been wrong before. They left him alone in the room for almost an hour. No phone. No lawyer yet. Just the fan clicking. Tund leaned back and closed his eyes. He replayed that night again. The bathroom. The blood on tissue. The phone call. Wait. The phone call. Who called him? He had not checked that number carefully. He opened his eyes slowly. Something about that call felt strange now. The voice had said the hospital called. But Amaka was in the car with him when the call came. She hadn't collapsed yet. Or had she? His breathing grew faster. Did he remember wrong? Grief can twist memory. He pressed his fingers against his temples. The blood started. She said something was wrong. Then the phone rang. The man said the hospital called. But how would the hospital know before they arrived? Cold realization crept into his stomach. The call came before they left the house. That made no sense. Unless someone else knew something was about to happen. Or someone wanted him distracted. His heart raced. Was he set up? The inspector returned. Your phone, he said, placing it on the table. Tund grabbed it quickly. May I see my call log? The inspector narrowed his eyes. Why? Because something doesn't add up. The inspector allowed it. Tund scrolled to that night. 8:41 p.m., unknown number. Duration, 26 seconds. But here was the problem. They had arrived at the hospital at 9:18 p.m. And according to his memory, Amaka collapsed in the car near Allen Avenue. But the call came before that. The inspector leaned closer. You're pale. Tund swallowed. The hospital didn't call me, he said slowly. Inspector Bamadil frowned. What do you mean? The call came before she collapsed. Silence filled the room. The inspector took the phone and stared at the log. Are you saying someone predicted her collapse? Tund's hands trembled. I'm saying, something is wrong. The inspector's expression shifted slightly. From suspicion, to curiosity. Give me the number, he said. Tund read it out. The inspector wrote it down carefully. Then he looked up. If you are lying, this will not end well. I'm not lying. Inspector Bamadil stood up. For now, you can go home. But don't leave Lagos. Tund exhaled slowly. That night, Tund returned to the Lekki house. The living room lights were off. He didn't turn them on immediately. He sat in the dark. His phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Different from the first. He stared at it. Then answered. A woman's voice. Calm. Mr. Tund. His body went stiff. Who is this? You received the note photo. Yes. I told you. I was on duty. Dr. Halima? No. The voice paused. I'm not calling to threaten you. Then why are you calling? Because your wife asked me something the day before she died. Tund's heart thudded. What? She asked for a private consultation. His throat dried. About what? The woman inhaled slowly. About updating her will. The room felt like it shrank. She didn't have a will, Tund whispered. The woman replied gently. She was planning one. Tund stood up suddenly. What are you saying? I'm saying, the voice continued, she was afraid. Afraid of what? She said someone close to her wanted her gone. Tund's hand began to shake. Who? The woman's voice dropped to a whisper. She didn't say. And then the line went dead. Tund stood alone in the dark living room. Rain started again outside. He replayed the words in his head. Someone close to her wanted her gone. Was it him? Was it her family? Was it someone at the hospital? His phone buzzed one more time. A message. A photo. It showed a document. Title, Draft Will, Amaka Nwosu Adebayo. Under, Primary Beneficiary. It did not say Tund. It did not say her brother. It said, to be determined. Tund felt his legs weaken. Because that meant one thing. She hadn't decided. And if she hadn't decided, then somebody might have panicked. Another message came. You're not the only one who lost something. Tund stared at the screen. And for the first time since her death, he wondered. Was Amaka's death really an accident? Or was he just the easiest person to blame? Outside, a car engine started across the street. Tund walked to the window. A black SUV sat there, headlights off. Watching. And then, the headlights turned on. The black SUV's headlights came on slowly. Not flashing. Not honking. Just, on. Tund stood behind the curtain in the living room of the Lekki duplex. His heart pounded so loud he thought whoever was outside could hear it. The engine didn't move. It just stayed there. Watching. Or maybe he was just scared and imagining things. He told himself, you are tired. You are grieving. Calm down. But grief does not make headlights turn on. He stepped away from the window. Then his phone buzzed again. Unknown number. He stared at it for 3 long seconds before answering. Hello? No response. Just breathing. Soft. Slow. Then the line cut. Tund's throat went dry. He walked back to the window carefully and peeked again. The SUV was still there. Then, slowly, it reversed. And drove off. No speed. No drama. Just quiet. And somehow that felt worse. The house felt different in the morning light. Amaka's framed medical certificate from the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, hung on the wall above the TV. Her smile in that picture looked proud. Bright. Alive. Tund stared at it for a long time. Who were you afraid of? He whispered. He picked up her old notebook from the side table. She always wrote small things down. Reminders. Thoughts. Grocery lists mixed with private worries. He flipped through slowly. Most pages were normal. Buy antibiotics. Call Dr. Sadiq about lab results. Pay electricity bill. Then he reached a page that made him stop. Written in her neat handwriting. I need to make things clear before anything happens. The next line. Trust is not the same as love. Tund sat down slowly. What did that mean? Was she talking about him? Or someone else? He flipped the page. Another note. If something goes wrong, I want peace. No fighting. His chest tightened. Peace. Instead, there was war. At noon, there was another knock on the gate. Not police this time. Chika. Tund opened the gate slowly. They stood facing each other in the hot Lekki sun. Chika looked tired, but his eyes were still sharp. We need to talk, Chika said. About what? Tund asked carefully. About the draft will. Tund froze. How do you know about that? Chika didn't answer the question. She was planning to change everything. To who? Tund asked. To Charity. That hit like a slap. What? Chika nodded. She told me 2 weeks before she died. She said she was tired of people thinking she was money. Tund's mind spun. She never told me. Chica gave a dry laugh. She didn't tell you a lot of things. The air between them felt heavy. Chica stepped closer. Did you know she came to Enugu alone last month? Tund blinked. No. She didn't tell you that either? Silence. Chica studied his face carefully. You really didn't know? Tund shook his head slowly. What did she come for? He asked. Chica hesitated. Then said, to see a different specialist. Tund's stomach dropped. What specialist? Chica swallowed. Fertility. The word hung in the air. She thought maybe the surgery made things worse. Chica continued quietly. She didn't want to tell you until she was sure. Tund felt something twist inside his chest. She thought I couldn't handle it, he whispered. Chica shrugged. Or maybe she thought you were already carrying too much. For a second, the anger between them faded. They were just two men who had lost the same woman in different ways. But then Chica's face hardened again. Still, he said, the timing is suspicious. Tund's jaw tightened. You think I killed her because of a will she hadn't even written? Chica's voice dropped. I think my sister was scared. And she's dead. Tund stepped back. So you need someone to blame. Chica didn't deny it. He just turned and walked away. That evening, Inspector Bamadil called. We traced the unknown number from the night she collapsed. Tund's pulse jumped. And? It was a prepaid SIM. Bought in cash. Used once. Then destroyed. Tund felt cold. So someone planned that. Yes. Silence. Did you tell anyone she was bleeding? The inspector asked. No. Did she? No. The inspector paused. That means whoever called you knew something was happening inside your house. Tund sat down heavily. That's impossible. Is it? The inspector replied. Tund closed his eyes. Could someone have been watching them? Listening? He remembered the black SUV. The breathing on the phone. The hospital note about delay. It was starting to feel less random. And more, arranged. The woman who had called before finally agreed to meet. Her name was Dr. Kemi Adeyemi. They met at a quiet cafe near Allen Avenue. She wore glasses and no makeup. She looked nervous. I shouldn't be here, she said. Then why are you? Tund asked. Because something felt wrong. She pulled out a folder from her bag. These are photocopies, she said. Originals are in hospital records. Tund's hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was the emergency timeline. And something circled in red. Blood pressure dropped sharply at 8:50 p.m. Tund frowned. That's before we reached the hospital. Yes, Dr. Kemi said softly. But that's not the strange part. She flipped another page. There was a toxicology screen. Tund blinked. For what? For a certain medication. What medication? Dr. Kemi hesitated. A high-dose anticoagulant. The word meant nothing at first. Then it clicked. A blood thinner, he whispered. She nodded. In very high doses, it can cause internal bleeding. Tund felt his stomach turn. Are you saying she was poisoned? I'm saying, Dr. Kemi replied carefully, the levels in her blood were not typical for someone who was not prescribed it. Tund stared at her. She wasn't on blood thinners. I checked her file, Dr. Kemi said. No prescription. Silence filled the small cafe. The sound of spoons clinking against cups felt too normal for this conversation. Did you tell the police? Tund asked. Dr. Kemi shook her head. Not yet. Why? She looked down. Because someone told me to drop it. Tun's breath stopped. Who? She whispered, a senior consultant. Why would they do that? Dr. Kemi looked up at him. That's what I'm afraid to find out. Tund walked out of the cafe into the noisy Lagos evening. Cars honked. Street sellers shouted. Life looked normal. But his world had shifted. If Amaka had high levels of blood thinner, and she wasn't prescribed it, then someone gave it to her. Who had access? Hospital staff? Family? Him? His mind raced. Then a horrible thought came. She had taken some medications at home. Painkillers. Supplements. What if something was mixed? What if? His breathing became shallow. What if he had given her something by mistake? No. No. He shook his head hard. He would remember. Wouldn't he? That night, Tund searched the kitchen cabinet where Amaka kept her medications. Most bottles were still there. But one was missing. A small white container labeled only with her handwriting. He opened the drawer again. Nothing. His heart pounded. He called Dr. Kemi. There was a container, he said. It's gone. She inhaled sharply. Gone? Yes. Mr. Tund, is it possible someone has a key to your house? Tund froze. He slowly turned toward the front door. The lock looked normal. But suddenly, the house didn't feel safe. Outside, he heard a faint metallic sound. Like a gate opening gently. Not forced. Opened with a key. Tund's heart slammed against his ribs. Because he was sure of one thing. He had locked that gate. Footsteps echoed faintly in the compound. And Tund was not alone in the house. The sound came again. Metal against metal. Soft. Careful. Tund stood frozen in the living room. He could hear his own breathing. Too loud. Too fast. The compound light outside flickered once. Then stayed on. He moved slowly toward the hallway and grabbed the nearest thing he could find. A heavy wooden candle stand. Not a weapon. But heavy enough. Another sound. Footsteps. Gravel crunching. He locked the gate again carefully. Double-checked it. Triple-checked it. Then he went back inside and sat on the floor in the living room. He felt small in that big house. He replayed everything. The blood thinner. The missing container. The prepaid SIM. The draft will. The black SUV. This wasn't random anymore. Someone was moving pieces. And he was standing in the middle. His phone buzzed. Inspector Bamadil. I need to see you, the inspector said. When? Now. At the police station, Inspector Bamadil looked more serious than before. He closed the office door. We checked hospital CCTV. Tund's pulse quickened. And? There was a visitor. Tund leaned forward. Who? A man who signed in under a fake name. He said he was family. When? The afternoon before your wife died. Tund's throat tightened. What did he do? He went to the pharmacy section. Spoke to a nurse. Then left. Tund felt a chill crawl up his spine. Did you identify him? The inspector paused. Yes. He turned a laptop toward Tund. A frozen image from CCTV filled the screen. Tund's breath stopped. He recognized the face instantly. Chika. Amaka's brother. No, Tund whispered. Inspector Bamadil folded his hands. According to staff, he asked about post-surgery medications. He said he was concerned. Tun's head spun. But that doesn't mean. There's more, the inspector interrupted. He pulled out a small sealed evidence bag. Inside was a white plastic container. Tun's heart jumped. That's from my kitchen, he said. It was found in your compound trash bin this morning. Tun's mouth fell open. What? I didn't throw that away. It had fingerprints. Mine? And someone else's. The inspector looked straight at him. Chika Nwosu's. The room went silent. Tund leaned back slowly. His chest felt tight. Chika. Why would he come to the hospital? Why would he handle that container? Memories flashed. Chika standing outside the house the night the police came. Chika knowing about the draft will. Chika saying, she was scared. Was she scared of him? Or of her own brother? Tund whispered, why? Inspector Bamadil sighed. Money changes people. But the will wasn't finished, Tund said. Exactly, the inspector replied. Silence stretched between them. Then the inspector added quietly. Your wife updated her land documents 2 weeks before she died. She removed her brother. Tund swallowed. And added me. Yes. The inspector leaned back. If she had written a will leaving things to charity, both of you would lose. Tund's head felt light. So you think? I think, the inspector said carefully, your wife may have been caught in a family power struggle. That evening, police went to Enugu. Tund didn't go. He couldn't. But he got the call. Inspector Bamadil's voice was steady. We brought him in. What did he say? Tund asked. He denied everything at first. And then? Then we showed him the fingerprints. And? Tund pressed. He admitted he visited the hospital. He said he wanted to protect family assets. Tund felt sick. Did he admit to giving her anything? He says no. Tund closed his eyes. Do you believe him? I believe, the inspector said, he panicked. 2 days later, Tund was allowed to see Chika. Not as enemies. But as 2 broken men sitting across a metal table. Chika looked different. Smaller. Tired. You think I killed my sister? Chika asked quietly. Tund didn't answer immediately. I think you were afraid, Tund said finally. Chika laughed softly. Of what? You? No, Tund said. Of losing control. Chika's jaw tightened. She worked too hard for strangers to take her property. I'm not a stranger, Tund said. Chika's eyes filled with something close to tears. You were going to take her away from us. She was my wife. She was my sister. Then Chika said something that changed everything. She told me she was changing everything to charity. She said none of us should fight. Tund nodded slowly. She told me something similar. Chika swallowed. I went to the hospital because I thought, if she didn't have a child, at least the property should stay in blood. Tund's stomach twisted. So you gave her something? Chika's voice rose. No. Then how did the blood thinner get into her system? Chika stared at him. And for the first time, he looked truly confused. I don't know. Later that evening, Inspector Bamadil called again. We ran a deeper test, he said. On what? Tund asked. The medication levels. And? There was no overdose before she reached the hospital. Tund frowned. What does that mean? It means, the inspector said slowly, the blood thinner was administered after admission. Inside the hospital? Tund whispered. Yes. Everything shifted. Again. Chica might have panicked. But he did not poison her. That meant someone else had access. Someone with medical knowledge. Someone who knew how to hide it. Tund thought of one person immediately. Dr. Halima. No. Dr. Kemi. Or someone higher. Someone who told Dr. Kemi to drop it. That night, Tund received a final message from the unknown number. It wasn't a threat. It was a photo. A hospital ID badge. Name clearly visible. Dr. Halima Yusuf. Under it, one sentence. She was the last person alone with your wife. Tund's heart pounded wildly. Because he remembered something now. After the surgery. When Dr. Halima had leaned close to Amaka and whispered something. And Amaka had looked. Not afraid. But shocked. Tund stared at the message again. If the medication was given after admission. And Dr. Halima was alone with her. Then the person he had begged to save her. Might be the one who ended her life. Outside, thunder cracked across Lagos. And Tund realized. The storm was not over. It was just beginning. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was Dr. Halima calling. The phone kept vibrating in Tund's hand. Dr. Halima Yusuf calling. Thunder rolled across Lagos. The lights flickered once, then steadied. He stared at the screen. Answer? Or let it ring? If she was innocent, why call now? If she was guilty, why risk calling at all? The phone stopped. Then it rang again. Tund swallowed and pressed answer. Hello? Her voice came calm. Too calm. Mr. Tund. He did not greet her. You were alone with my wife, he said. There was a small pause on the line. Yes, she replied. Several times. I was her attending physician. You administered medication. Yes. Blood thinners? Yes. His heart thudded. She wasn't prescribed any. Dr. Halima inhaled slowly. Meet me, she said. Where? My office. Tonight. Before the police come. The line went dead. Tund stood still for a long moment. Before the police come? That meant she knew something was moving. Something was closing in. And if she was asking to meet before that, she was either desperate or dangerous. The rain had returned. Lagos roads glistened under streetlights. As Tund drove toward St. Catherine's private hospital in Ikeja, his mind ran in circles. He remembered her face that night. The way she said, "We tried everything." Was that guilt? Or exhaustion? He remembered the moment she leaned close to Amaka. What had she whispered? He couldn't hear it clearly at the time. But Amaka had looked surprised. Then tired. Then quiet. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. If she heard Amaka. He didn't know what he would do. He wasn't a violent man. But grief can wake up things inside you that you didn't know were there. The hospital felt different at night. Quieter. Almost guilty. Tund walked down the hallway. His footsteps echoed. Dr. Halima's office door was half open. She stood by the window, still in her white coat. No makeup. No smile. Just a tired woman with dark circles under her eyes. You came, she said. You called, he replied. They stared at each other for a long second. Then Tund stepped inside and closed the door. Did you give my wife something that killed her? He asked directly. Dr. Halima didn't flinch. Yes, she said. The word hit like a slap. Tund felt the room spin. What? I gave her the anticoagulant, she said calmly. His hands curled into fists. Why? Because it was already in her system. He blinked. That doesn't make sense. She stepped closer. When she was admitted, her blood work showed abnormal clotting behavior. It looked like she had taken something. But she hadn't. She had, Halima said quietly. Just not knowingly. Silence fell between them. What are you saying? Tund whispered. Dr. Halima sat down slowly. I think your wife was being slowly medicated over time. Tund felt cold. By who? Halima shook her head. I don't know. Then why give her more? Because when a patient shows clotting irregularities, protocol says we stabilize the blood levels. If I didn't give it, the risk of stroke was high. Tund's chest rose and fell rapidly. So you were treating something that was already there? Yes. But the levels were too high, he said. Halima nodded slowly. Because someone had already increased the dose before she came. The words felt unreal. So you didn't poison her? No. Then why hide it? Halima looked at him sharply. Because the hospital board told me to. What? Tund asked. She leaned forward. Your wife wasn't just any patient. He frowned. She was connected. To who? To a pharmaceutical sponsor. Tund's head throbbed. I don't understand. Halima spoke carefully now. Your wife had agreed to participate in a post-surgery medication study. Tund froze. She what? It was optional. She signed consent forms. No, Tund shook his head. She would have told me. Halima's eyes softened. Sometimes doctors don't tell their families everything. Especially when they think it's minor. What kind of study? Tund asked. A new recovery drug designed to prevent post-surgical clotting. Tund's stomach twisted. A blood thinner. Yes. But it wasn't fully approved yet, Halima added quietly. The room went still. Tund leaned against the wall. You're telling me, he said slowly, that my wife was part of an experimental drug trial. Halima nodded once. It was supposed to be low risk. Supposed to be, he repeated. She swallowed. The dosage protocols changed mid-trial. His voice rose. And nobody told her? They sent email updates, Halima said weakly. Email? Tund's voice cracked. She was dying and they sent email? Halima's shoulders dropped. The board wanted it quiet. If this gets out, the hospital could shut down. So you hid it? I tried to report it, she whispered. They told me to drop it. Tund stared at her. You let them blame me. Her eyes filled slightly. I didn't know how far it would go. You watched them accuse me of murder. I was afraid, she said. The honesty in her voice hung heavy in the air. Everyone was afraid. Chica was afraid of losing property. The hospital was afraid of losing reputation. Halima was afraid of losing her job. And Amaka. Amaka had trusted them. Halima opened a drawer and pulled out a small flash drive. I copied everything before the board deleted records. Tund stared at it. This proves she was in the trial? Yes. And that the dosage was mismanaged? Yes. And that the levels were already high before you administered anything? Yes. So my wife wasn't murdered, Tund whispered. Halima looked at him carefully. She was failed. That felt worse somehow. Not an evil villain. Just greed. Pressure. Silence. Tund took the flash drive slowly. What are you going to do? Halima asked. He looked at her. I'm going to give this to the police. She nodded. They will try to stop you. Let them try, he said quietly. As Tun stepped out of the hospital office, his phone buzzed. Inspector Bamadil. We have a problem, the inspector said. What now? Tund asked. The hospital board filed an injunction. They're claiming defamation. They say you're spreading false information. Tund looked back at Halima's office door. They're trying to bury it, he said. Yes, the inspector replied. And they just issued a statement. What statement? That your wife died from natural complications unrelated to treatment. Tund felt anger rise in his chest like fire. He gripped the flash drive tightly. They were rewriting her death. Erasing her. Again. Inspector, he said slowly, what happens if I release the documents publicly? Then. You start a war. Tund looked down the long hospital hallway. At the nurses walking. At the patients waiting. At the quiet walls hiding secrets. He whispered to himself. She asked for peace. But peace had not protected her. And maybe. Just maybe. The truth would. As he stepped outside into the storm, two men in suits were waiting by his car. One of them smiled and said. Mr. Adebayo, we need to talk about that flash drive. The rain fell hard enough to sting. Tun stood beside his car in the hospital parking lot. The two men in dark suits did not look like police. They looked polished. Clean shoes. Calm smiles. Expensive watches. One of them stepped forward. Mr. Adebayo, he said smoothly. We work with the hospital's legal team. Tun didn't respond. The other man spoke. We believe you have some documents that could create unnecessary panic. Unnecessary? Tund asked quietly. The first man smiled again. Your wife's death was tragic. But accidents happen. Tund felt his jaw tighten. She was part of a drug trial, he said. The man's smile did not disappear. You are grieving, he said softly. Grief can confuse things. Tun's hand tightened around the flash drive in his pocket. We can offer compensation, the second man added. There it was. The word that made everything clear. Compensation. How much? Tund asked. They both looked relieved, thinking he was considering it. Enough for comfort, the first man said. Enough to move on. Move on. Like Amaka was a damaged product to be refunded. Tund looked at them for a long moment. Rain dripped from his eyelashes. You already took her life, he said. You don't get to buy my silence. The smile dropped. The first man's voice turned colder. Be careful, Mr. Adebayo. Court cases can get complicated. Your name has already been linked to suspicion. Tund stepped closer. You tried to let them call me a murderer. The man's eyes hardened. We're trying to protect everyone. No, Tund said. You're protecting yourselves. And for the first time since Amaka died, his fear felt smaller than his anger. The men stepped back. One of them said quietly, think carefully. Then they walked away. Tund sat inside his car afterward, hands resting on the steering wheel. He could walk away. Take money. Let the story die. No more police stations. No more headlines. No more whispers. Just silence. But he remembered Amaka in the hospital bed. Her fingers cold in his. Her whisper. Don't fight my family. She hadn't said, don't fight the truth. She had wanted peace. But peace built on lies is not peace. It's just quiet injustice. He started the engine. Inspector Bamadil arranged a meeting at the Lagos State High Court press room the next morning. Reporters filled the small hall. Cameras. Microphones. Notebooks flipping open. Tund stood at the front beside the inspector and Dr. Halima. His heart pounded so loudly he thought the microphone would pick it up. Inspector Bamadil spoke first. "We have obtained evidence indicating that the late Dr. Amaka Nwosu Adebayo participated in an experimental post-surgical medication study." Murmurs filled the room. Halima stepped forward. "The dosage changes were not properly communicated," she said. "The patient's internal bleeding was worsened by elevated anticoagulant levels already present before emergency intervention." A reporter raised a hand. "Are you saying the hospital is responsible?" Halima didn't hesitate. "Yes." The room exploded with noise. Flashbulbs. Questions shouted. Tund stepped toward the microphone. He swallowed. "My wife trusted the system," he said. "She trusted medicine. She trusted her hospital." His voice shook slightly. "She was not murdered by her husband. She was not killed for property." He paused. "She was failed by people who cared more about reputation than honesty." The room fell quiet again. Tund continued, softer now. "I don't want money. I don't want revenge. I want the truth to stand where lies have been standing." He stepped back. And for the first time since the courtroom, he felt like he could breathe. Later that week, Tund traveled to Enugu. Not for court. Not for property. For Amaka's memorial service. The church was quiet. Her mother sat in the front row, eyes swollen from crying. Chika stood near the wall, hands in pockets. After the service, Tund walked toward them. Nobody stopped him. He stood in front of her mother. "I'm sorry," he said. She looked at him for a long time. "I blamed you," she whispered. "I understand." She nodded slowly. "We were all afraid." Tund looked at Chika. Chika stepped forward. "I was wrong," he said quietly. Tund shook his head. "We were all trying to hold on to something." Chika's voice broke. "She deserved better." "Yes," Tund replied. They stood in silence for a moment. Not as enemies. Just as people who lost someone. Months later, the case against the hospital reached court. This time, the courtroom felt different. Not tense with accusation. But heavy with accountability. The judge ruled that the hospital had failed to properly disclose trial risks and dosage changes. They were ordered to compensate Amaka's estate and publicly acknowledge the error. The hospital's reputation shook. Investigations followed. Policies changed. And in the written judgment, one line stood out clearly. There is no evidence that the husband contributed to the death of the deceased. But this time, it sounded different. Not like a gunshot. Like closure. That evening, Tund returned to the Lekki house one last time. He had decided to sell it. Not because he didn't have the right to keep it. But because every wall carried echoes. He stood in the bedroom quietly. "I tried," he whispered. He placed Amaka's notebook on the bedside table. He read the line again. "Trust is not the same as love." He finally understood. She had loved many people. But trust requires honesty. And the hospital broke that trust. Her family broke that trust. Even he had broken it a little, by not asking more questions, by assuming she would tell him everything. He exhaled slowly. He wasn't perfect. He had delayed 5 minutes before leaving that night because he panicked. Because he was trying to calm her first. 5 minutes. Would that have changed anything? Maybe not. But guilt does not follow logic. It follows memory. And sometimes it stays.